Hey guys, thanks for coming back to part two. If you haven't watched part one, I do recommend watching it. At the end, I do say, well, some of the answers that Jamie Heath gave in his deposition transcript that we read, they could potentially be used by Jonesworks, by Stephanie Jones, to kind of shield herself a little from Jen Abel's claims and to strengthen her own claims against Jen Abel. I think that has potential, because part of the claim from Jen Abel is, that Stephanie Jones knew everything, was involved in everything, but Jamie Heath kind of said in his deposition, no, she was not part of the team. She wasn't involved. And I think if I'm thinking in the mind of Stephanie Jones's counsel, I'm using that, and I'm just forever going to be slapping it in front of any question about that and say, hold on a minute, no, Jamie Heath, he's the person who he hired and fired the PR, etc. He dealt with all of that, and he's saying I was not involved. Look, here's his deposition transcript. He says I was not involved. I was not part of the team. So no, I was not, aware of everything that Jen Abel was doing. She was acting outside the scope of her employment. Jamie Heath pretty much says the same thing. It has that potential, if it's used strategically. It's not like a slam dunk by any stretch, but it's certainly something that Wayfarer, Jen Abel would have to navigate. But that's just a thought process I have. So this is, I'm not going to go through all of this. This is Melissa Nathan's, the tag agency, Tag PR. This is their scope of work. And the one thing I will say about this, I'm not going to read it all, but for all of we've heard about, oh, well, did Stephanie Jones recommend you don't work with Melissa Nathan? Did she say she doesn't like Melissa Nathan? The one thing we do see all through this, right, if I just make it a bit bigger, is I can't highlight it right, is here, first line, Tag PR will work closely with Jonesworks. And here, this first bullet point, align with Jonesworks. Support, next one, support Jonesworks. I don't see anything. I don't see anything in this which makes me go, oh my god, like what were they thinking? This seems like perfectly normal PR, specifically crisis PR. But they're also talking about working very closely with Jonesworks. So that was just something of interest. I don't see how that helped Stephanie Jones at all with this motion. So moving on, we have a rather rare deposition excerpt from Jed Wallace. I haven't seen too many of these so far. And Jed Wallace, I find him such an interesting character because we know nothing about him. There is very little on social media, even though he's, in reality, he's all over social media. When I do my thumbnails, I even struggle to find a picture of him, and I have to use a picture of his counsel, Charles Babcock, which I don't mind because the guy's a legend. But he's such an elusive person. So I always, when we get these little windows into Jed Wallace, I personally, I find this exciting. So we are starting on, this is not much here. We're starting on page 118. I'm going to start from the third line down, actually. Question, Mr. Wallace, in connection with that work you were doing for Wayfarer, do you have any recollection of ever speaking with Miss Jones? As an objection, Wallace, related to Wayfarer? Question, yes. Wallace, I do not have any recollection. Jed, I do not have any recollection. Question, do you have any recollection of ever being copied on any communications with Miss Jones in connection with the work you were doing for Wayfarer? Jed, not that I recall. Question, did you ever understand that Miss Jones was involved at all in the work that you were doing for Wayfarer? Objection. Jed, yeah. Could you rephrase that question? Question. I'm wondering whether or not you had any understanding that Miss Jones was involved at all in any of the work you were doing for Wayfarer. Jed, I knew Miss Jones represented Wayfarer at one point. Question. But with regard to your work, you never spoke to her, right? Jed, I don't recall. Question. Sitting here today, you don't have a recollection of speaking with her in connection with Wayfarer, is that right? Jed, not in connection with Wayfarer. No, I don't recall. Oh. So then they show him an exhibit, exhibit 72. Babcock asks, are you done with one? And Tala says, yes, I am. Tala represents Jonesworks. Babcock, let's put that one back in the stack so we don't lose it. Oh. Jed, you handed me this one. Question. Mr. Wallace, you're now reviewing what has been marked as Exhibit 72. It's a document base stamped Jonesworks. Mr. Wallace, I'm not going to ask you about any other details of the article that you are being forwarded. Okay. Mr. Wallace's Exhibit 62, a forward that Melissa sent you on or about August 13th, 2024. And then it cuts off. Just checking. Yeah, then it cuts off at that point. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy read. Is this the right one? Let me just check. Okay. Okay, so this is Jen Abel's responses and oppositions to Lively's 7th interrogatories. Okay. Jones has attached these. I'm not going to go through, so this is just a normal course. All parties do this. To start by lodging general objections. So we'll go past that because it's going to be the same thing. But then it's basically this is questions that are put to the parties to identify information, people, documents, and we'll just have a little look and see at some of the responses. So I'll read the question. I'll just give a summary of the answer. I won't read it word for word. So interrogatory number 14, which is where the actual, we're now away from general objections. Identify in reasonable detail all factual and legal basis for your contention that the criticism against Lively on social media and tabloid/mainstream media during and after August 2024 was entirely organic. So then they go through, the first paragraph is all the objections. All right. And then, it's vague and ambiguous as to the meaning of criticism and entirely organic. Seeks information that's subject to expert opinion. Seeks information protected by attorney-client privilege and attorney work product. And then, they kind of round it off with, without waiving these objections, because they'll answer it. Most of the time, there will be cases where they decline to answer, or there is no answer to give. So they start by saying this one, Colin Hoover's highly successful It Ends With Us novel, Lively and her husband, and the film It Ends With Us have all been subject of extraordinary public interest. Although negative coverage of Lively began with the news of her casting, which is true, it did. People thought she was too old. People thought she wasn't the right person. It began with the news of her casting, continued due to paparazzi photos of her character's wardrobe, which was chosen by her. Rumours of discord between Baldoni, the lead actor and director, and Lively on set heightened media interest in and somewhat prior to August 2024, driven in large measure by Lively and certain cast members' mass unfollowing of Baldoni on social media, which is what she tried to do to one of her colleagues on Gossip Girl. Is it Penn Badgley? She then dated him later, weirdly, and there was also I can't remember. It was one of Taylor Swift's ex as well. They did the same thing there. So this has been something this is like an MO now that they use. Baldoni's conspicuous absence from the film's marketing and publicity events, as well as gossip regarding Lively's efforts to wrest creative control of the film, which she did. In response to public interest, the media began to report about a poorly conceived and tone-deaf marketing campaign for the film spearheaded by Lively in coordination with Maximum Effort and its principal, Ryan Reynolds. 2. Lively's promotion of a film about domestic violence with her hair care and alcohol brands. 3. Lively's alcohol brand sponsorship of an official film promotional event, and decision to name a signature cocktail after the film's male lead a domestic abuser. 4. Lively's conspicuous refusal to take photos or do press with Justin Baldoni and her exclusion of Baldoni from promotional appearances, international premieres, panel appearances, and screenings. 5. Lively's campaign to alienate the film's cast and crew from Baldoni, including the orchestration of their mass unfollowing of Baldoni's social media account. 6. Lively's pointed failure to meaningfully engage with the film's serious subject matter and emphasis of levity in her promotional appearances, interviews, and social media posts. 7. Lively's myriad of bizarre and or off-putting public appearances and interviews by leading up to the film's release. I mean, that sums it up. Lively further fueled the negative press by feeding information to the New York Times and other media outlets in advance of the filing of her complaint, which she provided, along with inflammatory text messages to the New York Times well prior to the complaint's filing. Criticism of Lively escalated when litigation commenced following her multi-month coordination with the New York Times to launder stolen private communications and peddle a false narrative in order to, in responding parties' view, resuscitate her tarnished public image at the Wayfarer's expense. Through the New York Times article, Lively stirred up significant public interest in her allegations against the Wayfarer parties. Through the New York Times article, Lively stirred up significant public interest in her allegations against the Wayfarer parties. Sorry, I've realised I just read that already. Lively's strategy backfired when the factual basis for her allegations started to unravel, and the real story began to emerge, painting a highly negative picture of Lively and her cohorts. That negative public image has only been heightened by the unrelenting public relations tactics of Lively's legal team, which has cynically exploited and thereby diluted the language of domestic violence survivorship, for example, DAVO, and engaged in a concerted abuse of subpoena power to intimidate internet influencers and chill public criticism of Lively. These factors and conduct by Lively and her agents organically created a climate of negative public sentiment against Lively, which spurred the media and internet users to dig up and recirculate unflattering content concerning Lively's behaviour from years past. Now, that answer contains everything. Everything. That summarises the whole thing from start to finish of what went wrong at the time, like the premiere time back in, like from the allegations, from her hiring, the news that she was being hiring, right? We go from there to right down to, subpoenaing content creators who have nothing to do with this, whilst also accusing Wayfarer of being abusive to her ex-friend Taylor Swift because they dared to subpoena her. Even though Taylor Swift was, by Lively's own words, right there with her through it, she experienced everything with her. And Lively put Taylor Swift down as a person with knowledge. That was abusive to subpoena her. How dare you? But it's Lively felt it was fine to subpoena over 100 people like me, including me. And we are literally, she has documented perfectly in this response everything that went wrong, all of the many reasons that this is all Lively's fault. It's her own doing. Her husband, maximum effort. The New York Times. I'm not going to read anymore because the next one is so I'll read the question. Identify in reasonable detail all factual and legal basis for your contention that social media and tabloid mainstream media support from Mr. Baldoni during and after August 2024 was entirely organic. So they largely give the same. We give this answer. Changes slightly here, where they just add in like a little line, to say Baldoni's support on social media and in tabloid/mainstream media starting in around August 2024 was a reaction to Lively's very public assault on him. As the media began to investigate and unravel the facts, the public responded with overwhelming support of the Wayfarer parties. While Lively shied away from the film's serious domestic violence storyline, Baldoni consistently engaged with it and spoke directly in the community of survivors through his interviews and social media presence. Baldoni also vocally supported his partnership with the domestic violence non-profit No More, often bearing a pin with its logo during public appearances. Baldoni's positive public image has only been heightened by the unrelenting public relations tactics of Lively's legal team, which has, and then they go on to use the same word, cynically exploited and thereby diluted the language of domestic violence survivorship, for example, Darvo, and engaged in a concerted abuse of subpoena power to intimidate internet influencers and chill public criticism of Lively. So the answer is actually the same, but they do change it because the question is now, it's not, why do you think Lively's negative criticism online and in the media is organic? So the question now is, why do you think Baldoni's positive support, sorry, I had a distraction then. Why do you think the positive messaging and support for Baldoni was entirely organic? So they give the exact same answer, but then they add this last paragraph about all the things, the positive things that Baldoni did for the film, for domestic violence. Again, a great answer. This next question. Identify in reasonable detail all factual and legal bases for your contention that Miss Lively acted and continues to act with unclean hands, as stated in paragraph 474 of your answer. And when we say unclean hands, what that means is, if you bring an action to court, you've got to come in good faith. You can't have done anything unethical, immoral, illegal, you know, to bring your case to the court. You've got to come with clean hands. And I suspect this we may hear about Van Zandt here. I haven't read it yet, so let's have a look. So there's the first paragraph of the usual general objections. Then he goes on to say, Lively participated in wrongful conduct of the same kind she accuses the Wayfarer defendants of committing, namely a smear campaign targeting Baldoni's professional and personal reputation and Wayfarer. Lively created the disputes, the hostility, and the animus of the set, alienated the cast and crew against Baldoni, sidelined Baldoni from the production, refused to treat Baldoni or his religious beliefs with respect, and orchestrated and is still pursuing a smear campaign to manipulate media and public sentiment against Baldoni. Lively also showed extreme disrespect and dismissiveness against victims of sexual violence and abuse by downplaying the film's anti-domestic violence theme, tying her own products, including an alcohol business, into her marketing and focusing on levity in the promotion of the film while ignoring the film's serious message about domestic violence. Notwithstanding Lively's complaints about the Wayfarer Party's purported coordination with the press, it was Lively, through a shell entity, who filed a sham lawsuit to launder responding parties' stolen communications and share them, spliced and stripped of context, with the press. Boom. I love it. See, I don't see any other. I haven't. Well, maybe that I just haven't seen it, but I don't see other content creators talking about these kind of responses. And I don't know whether it's because it's legal, so they're not talking about it, or they're more interested in depositions and texts, which are definitely interesting, or because these are quite lengthy responses and quite a bit to read. But honestly, I find this so interesting. They want to know about how the factual and legal basis for their for Abel's contention that Lively failed to mitigate damages. And basically, Abel basically says, well, she denies that Lively suffered any damages as a result of any act or omission by either Abel or Wayfarer. And they're basically saying, well, Lively has failed to mitigate her damages because Lively has not made any effort to diffuse the storm of negative press that she herself instigated. That is how they're saying, well, that's how Lively failed to mitigate her own losses. She did nothing. She instigated a storm of negative press, and then when she saw that it was actually having a backlash against her, she failed to step in to mitigate it, to diffuse the situation. She also points to the fact that Lively acknowledges declining to work on projects at the same time as her husband to avoid being apart from one another, limiting the opportunities available to her. Which again, we've seen in Ryan Reynolds' text to Justin Baldoni. He referenced a project that she had just got out of it. He also says, she picks and chooses what she wants to do, and she sacks off some many projects. So, but it's also common knowledge that they do not like to work at the same time, and that's clear in this film as well, because that extended, like her Lively not coming back to okay, so Lively's letter, her 17-point protection letter, was the date of that on the 9th of November was not an accident, in my opinion. Okay. The 9th of November was when Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine, was it was announced that it was going to start shooting again. So not only had Lively already skipped town to join her husband in London, um, she happened to send a letter demanding, well, I'm not coming back unless you can guarantee this, this, and this, and this. And it happened to coincide on the day that Deadpool and Wolverine announced that it was going to restart shooting again. And then you think, well, it's nearly a 2-month delay because they were trying to get her back to work in November, in December, and they could not get her back before January 4th. Why? Because then and only then had Deadpool and Wolverine finished. And Ryan Reynolds was back in New York. So these things did not happen by accident. That's my opinion. We have covered those timelines over and over again in Expos. But yeah, I completely agree with Jen Abel here that she has a well-known habit of declining projects, and in this case, she couldn't decline it because it had already started. So the best thing she could do, the next best thing, was to delay it and throw hammers and wrenches into the cogs. I mean, I think she was fortunate that production was shut down. However, it was only shut down initially for one day. And then she'd already gone to London by this point. She wasted no time setting off to go to London. And then when production was reopened again for Wayfarer to continue the film, she wasn't available, and they had to do the shots that they had with the young cast, young Lily and young Atlas. So yeah. So and I just go on to say, she's also further harmed her own reputation by her tone-deaf cross-promotional efforts, associating hair care and liquor with domestic violence, making provably false claims about Wayfarer, and exploiting the language of Me Too in a manner that has undermined her credibility. Abusive legal tactics, including the initiation of a sham legal action through a shell company, i.e. Van Zandt, to launder stolen communications, as well as a scorched earth legal campaign to intimidate content creators and chill online criticism of Libby. And that is exactly what happened. And then finally, exploiting her power and influence to coordinate the publication of a one-sided hit piece, the New York Times article. Identify individuals other than you whom you contend directly and proximately caused Miss Lively's damages and injuries. Okay, so the usual objections. Let's go through. Who does she think damaged Lively's reputation, caused her injuries, etc., that she's claiming? Well, firstly, Blake Lively, then Ryan Reynolds, then Maximum Effort, then Leslie Sloan, then Vision PR, then Stephanie Jones. Yeah, and Jonesworks, and then Sony. Identify in reasonable detail all factual and legal basis for your contention that Miss Lively planned and implemented a smear campaign against Mr. Baldoni and Wayfarer. So we got the normal, the general objections. I mean, it's the same thing, all of the stuff, the negative stuff she put out, the unfollowing of social media, banishing Baldoni from promotion in the premiere, the false sexual harassment allegations, releasing an otherwise confidential CRD complaint for the purpose of causing maximum reputational damage to Wayfarer, releasing statements that are inflammatory through her legal team, including accusing them of Darvo. So, yeah, that's fair. That's good. Identify in reasonable detail all factual and legal basis for your contention that Miss Lively sought to vilify any Wayfarer, defendant, Wallace, or street relations to resuscitate her public image. Well, where do we even start with that? So, general objections. I'm going to read this one actually. From the time of her casting as Lily Bloom, and especially after the release of paparazzi captured photos of her character's wardrobe chosen by Lively, Lively has been scrutinized on social media. In and or around and somewhat prior to August 2024, responding parties, that's Abel, observed that criticism of Lively heightened on social media and to a lesser extent in tabloid mainstream media for, among other things, her perfunctory treatment of the film's serious subject matter, off-putting and tone-deaf public appearances, and Lively's decision to cross-promote her alcohol and haircare brands with a domestic violence movie. Because Lively had so effectively isolated Baldoni from her promotional activities, Baldoni was insulated from the public backlash Lively incited. Yeah, that's really true. In response, responding party believes Lively has engaged in a concerted effort to vilify responding party and other Wayfarer parties, Jed Wallace, and street relations in an effort to resuscitate her public image. That campaign started in August 2024 when Lively's publicist started planting negative stories about Baldoni, including that he had fat shamed her and that he belonged to a cult. Lively then worked in secret with Wayfarer and Baldoni's former public relations firm Jonesworks and Stephanie Jones to launder private communications stolen from responding parties' phone and cloud accounts, splicing and stripping them of context to support a factually false narrative that Lively's reputational challenges were a function not of her own missteps, but instead of a smear campaign orchestrated by responding party and the Wayfarer parties in retaliation for purported allegations of sexual misconduct. Lively and or her agents fed these false allegations to the New York Times, which ultimately regurgitated them in a bombshell article intended for maximum public impact. The day before publication, Lively requested a right to sue notice from the California Civil Rights Department and attached a recitation of purported factual allegations. Lively's attachment was procedurally unnecessary and would have been confidential had she not leaked it to the New York Times for publication. Responding party believes these actions were designed to change the prevailing narrative about her and recast her as the victim rather than the architect of her own undoing. Okay. Identify all persons with whom you communicated via Signal concerning the digital campaign, Miss Lively, Mr. Reynolds, the film, or the consolidated actions and the date of each such communication. So general objections, responding party included on various Signal chats involving Brian Friedman. You've got Teresa Troopson, Summer Benson, Jason Sunshine, Christina Puello. I cannot read that name, sorry. So they're all from Friedman's firm. Then you got Mitchell Schuster, Kevin Fritz, Stacey Ashby. They're from Fritz's firm. Mitra Ahurian, she's from her own firm. But she's a friend of Wayfarer's, good friend. She was in the basement at the premiere. But also she has her own law firm. You got Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, Steve Sauritz, Tara Hanks, Mitz Toskovich, Ahmed Muziol, Melissa Nathan, Brianna Koslow, Spencer Friedman, who's Brian Friedman's son, Jared Friedman, also Friedman's son, Christina Perello, who we've already seen her name, Jed Wallace, Rosa Calantari, Riley Long, Sage Steele, Carolina Hurley, Dervla McNeese, Alex Seeley, Catherine Case, Michael Lawrence, James Vatuska. James Vatuska changes his story every time he speaks to someone new. I'm not going to go through that one. Or that one. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it with those answers. It's just interesting to see how they respond, but also like how do you know that Lively's backlash was organic? Well, here's the 500,000 ways that she caused all of this through her own actions, and that becomes like even if if you give one or two or three good solid reasons why I think Lively did this because she marketed alcohol. I think Lively did this because, she was tone deaf and didn't really talk about domestic violence, didn't take the role seriously. With one or two, Lively can bat that away. When you've got as many as they've listed here, that becomes a lot harder to bat away all of those. So I like reading stuff like that. Let's move on. Okay, so now we've got deposition transcript excerpt of Jamie Heath. Okay. So, question. This is on page 359, by the way. Question. On August 11th, Mr. Wallace said, you referred to Signal. Do you see that? Jamie, which one is this? Question. August 11th at 12:02 a.m. Jamie, hey man, I appreciate your message. I could tell after speaking with you. Question. In the middle, you say, and then you read, as for Signal, I'm not on it, but we'll set that up this week for sure. I'll let you know once I've done that. Do you see that? Jamie, I do. Question. Did you set up Signal at this time? Jamie, I must have. I think I might. I think I did. Oh. Question. And did you let Mr. Wallace know that you had set it up? Jamie, I don't know. Question. Did you communicate with Mr. Wallace on Signal at this after August 11th, 2024? Jamie, I think there were a few messages sent. Question. And when did you first send Signal? So we're jumping to page 364. So Ezra Hudson is doing the questioning. Question. Did you communicate with Miss Abel on Signal in September of 2024? Jamie, I may have. Question. Did you communicate with Miss Nathan on Signal in 2024? Jamie, I may have. Question. Did you communicate with Mr. Friedman on Signal in 2024, in September of 2024? Jamie, I know for sure not. Question. And why do you know that one for sure? Jamie, well, because I only had one conversation with Mr. Friedman. Question. On Signal? Jamie, no, I had one conversation with him in, I don't remember what month it was. Maybe it was in August. Question. Did you communicate with anyone on Signal in October of 2024? Jamie, I may have. Question. And did you communicate with Mr. Wallace on Signal in October of 2024? Jamie, it's the same. I may have. And then it cuts off. And now we have the last exhibit that's unsealed in this bunch so far. So I put the, this is obviously part 2. We've done a part 1 video. I like you keep it open then. If anything else gets unsealed, then we'll do a part 3 and however many more we need. This doesn't look too long actually. Okay, so this starts on page 49. It's the deposition of Melissa Nathan. So I'm going to start on line 2. Question. In general, Nathan, no. Question. And did you at any point during the time period of July 1st, 2024 to the present ever have an auto-delete function enabled on your regular messaging app on your phone? Friedman objects. Melissa Nathan, no. So Gottlieb's questioning. Question. You sometimes use Signal, is that right? Nathan, I do. Question, and you were using Signal at least for some purposes in July and August 2024. Is that right? Nathan, it is. Question, and Signal is not like the standard Apple messaging product, is it? Is that right? Nathan, I can't speak to the Apple messaging product, but I know what Signal is used for. Question, and what is it used for? And Melissa, it's been really popular, especially in all of our live business over the last couple of years, because there's an option that it auto deletes messages for private, and then it cuts off there. So that's that. All right. I will keep an eye out for anything else that comes down today. There was an order on the RFAs as well, so I will probably do a separate video for that, just to try and keep things separate. All right, guys. Have a good day.